Welcome to Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, brought to you by Byrne Production Services. Here, we explore the different ways business events can bring value to your organization, the latest technological advances in the event space, as well as providing you with actionable strategies to make a business event a success. Let's create an exceptional event experience.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Byrne. So today we are actually launching Season 2. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of the listeners and the fantastic guests we've had since last October. We've got some exciting things to come in the next year of the podcast, including a couple of new formats. So each month, we're going to be starting a regular industry panel with Evan Babbins from Intuit and Candice Davis. We'll be discussing most relevant news and factors affecting the industry and handling some really hot button topics every month in the third week of each month. So make sure to like and subscribe and follow the show to get access to those episodes. Of course, we'll also be coming to the industry events throughout the year to record on-location episodes. You'll be able to catch us at IMEX in a few weeks, the Event Marketing Summit, PCMA, SEMA, and many more. So if you're not following Byrne Production Services on all the social platforms to find out where you can meet myself and the rest of the team, please go over to LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find us there. We'll still be featuring one-on-one interviews with thought leaders and guests from around the industry. And finally, this episode is one of our new formats. I'll be doing some deep dive episodes on particular topics and areas of interest for event professionals and event marketers who want to know more about specific areas in the event production world. If you have a topic or a direct question you want to ask about, or send a note to connect@byrneproductionservices.com. Again, that's CONNECT at byrneproductionservices.com, or reach out directly to me on LinkedIn. If you send a voice recording, your question might be featured in one of these episodes. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and leave us a review on whatever platform that you listen to podcasts. Okay, on to the topic for this episode. So today I want to talk about negotiating with in-house AV. And I think a lot of event professionals just heard me hear that say that sentence and instantly got a migraine. I get it. It's very frustrating. We've heard a lot of people complaining about the rising cost and the lowering standard of in-house services. And sometimes this is something that I keep hearing from people. They feel left behind. So recently I participated in a webinar with another group called GDP Global for their gdpuniversity.com platform. You can check that session out at gdpuniversity.com. Just sign up. It's totally free, and you can watch that entire webinar where we talked about the art of negotiation generally for the events industry, and we certainly handled a lot of stuff about in-house AV. But I wanted to do a particular episode this week about this really hot button topic. Recently, I was at Canadian Meetings Events Expo in Toronto, and somebody who was doing one of the keynotes asked a question of the crowd, and they said, "Hey, so who's been in this industry for 20 plus years, 30 plus years?" And a few people have raised their hands. But then they asked how many people have been in this industry for less than 5 years. And what was really amazing was that 70% of the people in the room raised their hand. It's a consequence of what's happened since the pandemic that a lot of event professionals left this industry. Certainly weathering the pandemic was very difficult. Getting back to it was even more difficult. And I swear to God, if I had a dollar for every time I've heard of an event professional announcing on LinkedIn that they now sell houses or commercial real estate, I would be a very rich man. But the reality is that we have had a lot of talent leave this industry. And what they've taken with them is that institutional knowledge that those veterans would have about negotiating with in-house, negotiating hotel contracts, food and beverage contracts. And so I think right now there is a little bit of a knowledge gap that needs to be filled. So when GDP reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come and do this webinar?" I jumped to the chance because I really want everybody to really understand what's important about the in-house contracts, what you can negotiate out, and what understanding how those businesses work within the greater industry vertical will actually help you get more value out of that. Now, this is not to say like I thoroughly believe that there are appropriate times for in-house exclusive services, and I'm certainly not going to do the whole thing where, oh, just never use the in-house. I think there are specific times when using the in-house is a very, very good idea, and you should definitely consider them. However, I want to make sure that you, the listener, are aware of what options are available to you, how those systems work, and by gaining that knowledge, hopefully, I can give you a little bit of leg up in your next set of negotiations. So, as I said, the biggest complaint we hear from event professionals across the industry is that the service levels are not matching the expense. So, organizers and planners feel left behind. They come in most of the time, being a third party production company. I will sometimes come in after that particular part of the contract has been signed, but there are still things that you can negotiate in as a rider to that contract to make sure that you get the things you want. But I will say, and we'll get into it a little bit later in the episode, you do have the opportunity in the initial negotiation to either have those clauses very, very well laid out in your contract or negotiate it out. Because really the venue and the hotel has a vested interest in making sure that you are happy as a customer and coming back and using their property over and over again. So understand what they want and give it to them so that you can get what you want out of that contract. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is the three main pillars of the in-house organization that you will most likely be encountered with. Everybody has this perception that they are one single big organization that have this multitude of services, but they are actually broken up into three main pillars. The first pillar is the power and rigging service arm. This, I think, is a vitally important thing to have as an exclusive and in-house service within a venue. The way I like to put it is, if I came into your house and I started plugging things in the wall or hanging pictures where I felt that they should go and just nailing into your drywall, you might have an opinion about that. You, as the owner of that facility and as of the infrastructure that's in your house, know that it's better if you plug it in there and don't put a nail in that part of the wall because there's actually concrete behind there instead of just drywall, and you're going to hit a stud there or whatever it might be. So I really think that that particular service is better suited to be an exclusive and in-house service. The executional arm of that leg of the company is some of the most wonderful and professional people I have ever worked with in my entire career. They know the venue really well. They know the rigging points really well. They know they've seen everything under the sun come in and out of their venue, whether or not the other parts of their company are helping to produce the technical aspects of those shows and events. They have seen everything come in. So they are really, really knowledgeable. And to be able to leverage that knowledge and leverage that expertise, I think behooves every event professional who walks in that door. So let's talk about the second main leg of that company. And what that is I call it the quick service leg. They are inventoried and set up to handle what is admittedly 70% of the volume of event traffic that comes into a given venue. Now, these are your typical, maybe a 10-person leadership meeting, a small breakout of 50 people, a regional meeting, weddings, social events, all of those things that regularly come into a hotel. And so they're very, very well set up to be able to service those particular size of events. They, in some cases, have made very heavy investment in the infrastructure for servicing that type of event. Their inventory in-house will tend to be, a few pop-up screens, a few small projectors, a lot of what we call speakers on sticks. So, small speakers on speaker stands, and a few microphones and your typical presentation support, like a cue remote and a timer. They are very well suited for executing that size of event on a day-to-day basis. And again, their inventory is created in such a way that they look at the property and say, look, 70-ish% of what this hotel is doing is, two speakers on sticks, one microphone, and a PowerPoint machine on a pop-up screen with a small projector. So they'll have 5 or 6 of those setups at the hotel, and they can service this extremely well. So I think that there is an advantage to using the in-house for those size and scope of events. Now, the third part of that company is a big, gigantic, global mega production company. They, as some of the listeners may know, and yourself listening may know, they went out and acquired quite a large amount of third-party production companies and larger scale production companies over the last 10 or 15 years. And so they do service a lot of larger scale events. The problem that starts to come, and this is where we go back to event organizers feeling left behind, or that service level is not quite matching the price point, is that third arm is only as big as their biggest clients. And so when the middle arm, which is the day-to-day service arm, tries to conflate themselves with the larger organization, then you're running into a group that is not designed to handle that large scale event. And so they scramble to grow up to that. They don't have access to the larger global inventory. So then they have to go to third-party suppliers within that market, and then use subrentals and subcontracting to be able to execute it. And I think that there's a disconnect between how an event organizer or planner going into that venue is setting an expectation of the level of execution and the production value that they want to get out of that contract. And that service arm is really not set up to be able to do it. So look, again, I think that if you go into a venue, say, where the in-house has invested millions of dollars into embedding screens into the ceilings of all of the breakout rooms and some embedded speakers, and it just plugs something into the wall and it works, that is a perfect business model for that size of execution. But then when it comes to your main general session room or where you're going to invest your production value, it's that disparity that makes things fall apart a little bit. Okay. So this, again, needs to be about education. By understanding those 3 main arms of that in-house provider and asking those questions of, are you set up to be able to handle this large of an event with the inventory that is in this property right now? And ask them detailed questions about whether or not they would have to subcontract or pull inventory from their larger global pool and how difficult that might be. once you can start to ask those questions initially, it helps you better evaluate what that potential promise and that fulfillment might be. So the other thing that I'll say about negotiations right off the top is that asking questions is not a bad thing. A lot of younger planners or planners who have not been directly involved in those negotiations can sometimes feel very intimidated. I'll say that some providers and some venues will purposely make that language very intimidating and in the goal of trying to get it to push through. And so a lot of planners have shared with me over the last 20 years of my career that when they see those gigantic 40-page documents trying to outline every single legal clause or possibility or risk management, they start to get a little bit intimidated and don't feel that they have the ability or the right to question or ask or delve into it. So the first thing I'm going to say is in the art of negotiation, you have every right to ask the question, to gain clarification. And that is a chief indicator that if somebody is not willing to tell you what that means or help guide you through that process, then they may not have your best interest at heart. And so I always say, ask the question. There is no such thing as a dumb question. And in fact, it's kind of a poor risk management if you don't question the things that you don't understand. I always tell my clients to make sure that they have clarity, that they understand what they're signing, and if they don't understand it, to refuse to sign it. Okay. But I also want to caution away from being very litigious. By understanding what the AV company in-house is trying to get out of this relationship, which is, as an example, they've invested a lot into the rigging and power infrastructure. They've invested a lot of money and manpower and resources into kitting out all of the breakout rooms. They invested all of this time and effort into that. So it's extremely valuable to them to get more revenue and more scope out of the things that they have invested in. So those are perfect examples where you can leverage that want from them to get what you want out of the rest of the relationship. I'll tell a little anecdote of we were working on a large scale show at a convention center where there was an in-house vendor, and they had a very particular exclusivity on a single department in a particular room of the convention center. It wasn't the entire convention center. It was just a single room in that venue. The reason that they had that exclusivity, and I think it had a lot of validity, was that they had made this particular room in partnership with the venue. They had invested a lot of infrastructure costs. They had bought a lot of inventory. They had installed it semi-permanently. And so they had some exclusivity on that equipment in the room. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Look, if I parked a car in your garage, I mean, it is your garage. However, it's my car. So I don't want anybody else driving it. So I totally understand. What was a bit of a disconnect was when we decided to bring a larger scale event into this venue because the client really loved the venue as it stood and saw some great possibility. We approached the in-house and said, we know that you have exclusivity on this particular department, which was lighting in the venue. We understand that what you have as inventory in this room is not going to be suitable for what we're proposing in this design. And so we would like to either split the exclusivity or figure out, if you have to have the exclusivity, that we have a decent market price. Now, I will say that the original proposal that came to us and the team was egregiously expensive. Now, this is where I say, ask those questions, but ask those questions over a phone call. Yes, you can be very litigious and you can, write out, you said, I said, make sure your bases are covered in writing. And I do think that you need to have some of that backup just because we are in a litigious society. But what ended up saving the show, to be honest, because we went back to them and told them that we thought the pricing was egregious, and we went back and forth on email a couple of times to see if we could negotiate it that way, and they weren't really budging. And so we got them on a phone call and we laid out the economics of it. We said, look, if you're charging so much of a higher rate above market norm for a package of this scope, that we know mathematically that if we pulled this event out of your venue and paid all of the cancellation fees and then replicated all of the things that we liked about this venue in the room next door, including the seating, some of the architecture, if we faked it, if we rigged some new drapery, whatever it might be, we would still be 50 to 60% less than what you are proposing charging for this. And it was a great conversation. The head of the department for that venue and for that in-house vendor really understood what we were getting at. We didn't want to overspend for the scope. We understood that they needed to get the revenue for the scope. And so we were able to have a great compromise negotiation. And so I tell that story because I want you as a listener to know that even if you see something you don't like, even if you don't see a price that you don't like or a service level that you don't like, yes, you should follow that up in writing a little bit just to make sure that, everybody's aware of what's going on. But the easiest solution is just to pick up the phone, have a conversation with another human being about what another human being is trying to understand and trying to accomplish with that event. So a couple of other things that come up in in-house contracts. So errors of omission. And this happens a lot in in-house AV. And so they're all based on a BEO or a banquet event order. That's how a lot of in-house AV companies have been trained and or operations have adapted to working in venues that use the BEO as a standard for communicating daily scope changes and charges. So what a lot of event planners seem to vocalize is an issue is that if you treat the AV scope in the same BEO manner, then it can be a little bit confusing, and that's where you get your errors of omission. Because on day one, it'll say, microphone, tablet, speakers, projector, screen, so on and so on. But if it doesn't transfer to the second day on the BEO, then sometimes it can surprise planners where they realize that, no, they weren't paying for any AV on that third day, but it's still in the room, and now they're surprised that they get a charge for it. So what I always advise is, although the in-house company, because they are attached to a hotel and or convention center that will use a BEO as part of their detailed contracting, you can ask the AV company to simplify their scope and quote and estimate to the normal standard of an audiovisual company or a production company, which is item times the quantity times the price times the multiplier. The multiplier is the amount of days being charged. For those of you who know, the days being charged is how many days that you will be charged for a piece of equipment. Usually, industry standards for some equipment is a 1 day week because it's the same as a weekly rate. or what's known as a 3-day week, which is something that came out, developed in the industry 15 years ago when some audiovisual and production companies started to realize that it was better as a loss leader to not charge for rehearsal days or load in and setup and dismantle days for the rental. So they would say it's a 3-day week, meaning the rehearsal day, the show day, the second show day, and then the dismantle day. So if you can talk to your in-house potential supplier about, hey, it's great that you put this in the BEO, but do you have a copy of your scope of work so that I can review that and understand what the multiplier is and when we do and do not have access to equipment, because that will avoid some surprises. Okay, so that's my rant about in-house AV negotiation. The practical tip I'll leave you with is always to ask as many questions as humanly possible. And if anybody's getting annoyed with you, if anybody is questioning you, questioning them, that's a sure sign that something is about to go wrong. So my advice at that point is to ask more questions. The partners that you work with, whether they are in-house, third party, or your brother Bill, to be honest, needs to be there to help guide and help you through that process. They're not there to just sell you something. They're not there to list charges and get it put on a piece of paper. Who they should be serving is the purpose and the intent of your event and the support of the team and guiding everybody through that process. And if you're not getting that, you have every right to question that and make sure that you get the information that you need. So thank you very much for listening to this episode. Again, we're going to be coming out with one of these deep dive episodes, just me on camera, once a month. If you'd like to learn more about Production Value Matters, get access to some more deep dive content on a weekly and bi-weekly basis, please go to byrneproductionservices.com/PVM. And that's byrneproductionservices.com/PVM for Production Value Matters. There you can see past episodes and get access to some of the deep dive content that we are going to be doing following this episode. Thank you very much for listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode.
Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To find out more about Byrne Production Services and how putting on events can drive value for your business, visit byrneproductionservices.com. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Production Value Matters, thank you so much for listening.